Hello, and welcome to this T-Level Tactics video for Root Core 1 Business Context of the T-Level Digital Support Services course. In this video, we're focusing on malicious activity. Let's take a look at what we're going to do. First of all, we'll identify types of hackers and what that word really means. Then we'll explain types of malicious activity that an organization may encounter. And then finally, we'll analyze the implications of hacking on an organization. These videos are not endorsed or sponsored by any education institution or qualification awarding body, and T-Level Tactics videos should not be used as a replacement to any classroom learning, as the discussion and practical activities with peers and your lecturer will help to expand your thinking and comprehension. Instead, these materials are best used for preparation or revision to reinforce your learning. And if you're studying T-Level Digital Business Services, these videos will work for you as well, but they are more contextualized towards IT support roles. Let's take a look at hackers. So a hacker is a somewhat generic term to identify someone who attempts to gain unauthorized access to systems or information. And hackers are often identified by the color of their hat, depending on their intention or motivation. We can have white hat hackers or authorized hackers. These are usually ethical hackers who use their skills to identify and fix security vulnerabilities to help improve security for organizations. We have black hat hackers or unauthorized hackers. Black hat hackers will engage in malicious activities such as stealing data, spreading malware, or disrupting systems for personal gain. We've also got grey hat hackers, which are somewhere between the two. It's a kind of hacker that may engage in activities that are not entirely ethical, but not necessarily malicious either. They might be doing the right thing in the wrong way, for instance. There are some other types of hats as well, but these aren't as common in terms of their usage, and they're not necessarily all agreed upon in terms of what they mean. You might encounter blue hats, hired individuals to carry out system penetration testing, but blue hat can also mean an individual who's carrying out black hat activities as an act of revenge. You may encounter red hat as a term, which is an individual who has white hat motivations that uses illegal methods. That's similar to that grey hat term we used a moment ago, but red hat could also mean somebody who hunts after other black hats to prevent their harmful activity. And finally, green hats, which is essentially someone who's new to cybersecurity, who may lack knowledge or understanding of consequences of their actions. So why hats? Why have we used this term? Well, the original black hats and white hats were labelled based on early 1900s gangster movies, where the colour of a hat would indicate the intentions of a character. The protagonists of the movie would wear a white hat, while the antagonists would wear a black hat, and this would make them much more identifiable to the viewer in the age of black and white films. Let's have more of a look at those first three types: black, white, and grey hats. So malicious actors, or black hats, are usually going to be individuals or entities that engage in harmful or illegal activities with the intent to cause damage, steal information, disrupt operations, or exploit vulnerabilities for personal gain. White hat hackers, on the other hand, sometimes known as ethical hackers, will use their expertise to identify and address security vulnerabilities in systems, networks, and software. White hats will work to improve cybersecurity by proactively finding and fixing weaknesses before they can be exploited by malicious actors. White hats may work for or in an organization, but always carry out their activities with permission. And finally, grey hats. They're the ones that will engage in hacking activities that aren't entirely ethical, but they're not necessarily malicious either. They may discover vulnerabilities in systems without permission, but they won't necessarily exploit them for malicious purposes. They may notify the system owners about the vulnerabilities they find, or they may publicly disclose the vulnerabilities to raise awareness. And grey hat hackers usually work individually, and you'll often find that they participate in bug bounty programs, which is where they'll find vulnerabilities in systems in order to receive a reward in return. So for Patreon members, it's the last task sheet of Root Core 1. Head over to patreon.com/T-Level Tactics to download that task sheet and have a go at the first task. It'll take about 10 minutes and it's just looking at hackers. So pause the video here, have a go at task 1, then come back and move on for part 2. So, malicious activity in organizations. Well, there's two key types we're going to look at: technical and non-technical malicious activity. We're going to explore these somewhat and look at some different types of malicious activity now, but you'll go into much more depth on these in Root Core 10 Security. We'll start off with non-technical threats. Now, non-technical threats could come in the form of malicious employees, who will be people working for the organization that are looking to cause deliberate damage or loss. Perhaps they feel somewhat aggrieved by something that's happened at work and they want to try and take some revenge on their employers. It could be a natural disaster such as flooding, fire, earthquakes, tsunamis, pandemic, anything like that. And that links in with disaster recovery. You might want to go and revisit that video. It could also come in the form of physical damage and theft, usually from individuals from outside the organization, and it could be against either buildings or equipment. And there's always human error, which is going to be accidents and mistakes by individuals and people working for the organization or business that they don't mean to cause deliberate damage or harm, but it's still a threat we need to consider. In terms of technical threats, we can have malware, which is a shortened phrase for malicious software, often installed without a user's knowledge. And it can cause damage to software or collect data on users. And there's lots of different types of malware out there that all do slightly different things. It could be malicious emails that aim to mislead users into giving personal or organizational information over to a malicious actor. You could encounter botnets, which is software that attempts to control a network of devices and reconfigure them for a malicious purpose. Potentially even distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS, which would be a large number of devices flooding an online service with an overwhelming volume of requests. The result of this often results in web servers crashing due to being unable to cope. Now, any of these threats can come from inside or outside of the organization. Internally, the risk often comes from lack of staff training or knowledge, leading to accidentally giving away information through email scams or installing malware. And externally, large organizations face many of these threats every day. In fact, multiple times a day in some cases. You could take a look at a website such as threatmap.checkpoint.com for an active analysis of cyber attacks that are being carried out right now around the world. I recommend you head over there. It's in real time and it's really quite interesting, the number of cyber attacks that go on at any one moment. So for Patreon members, it's time to take a look at task 2 on the task sheet. So head over there, have a go at the second task, and spend about 20 minutes looking at some different threats. Pause the video here, have a go, and then come back for the third part of the video. So let's take a look at some of the implications for organizations. What happens when organizations are affected by malicious activity? What happens within the organization to address the issue? And what's the impact on the organization from an external perspective? Well, internally, you may find that certain staff may have restricted privileges. there may be a disciplinary process involved. Could be that there's some restriction on employability, either on the organization or on the individual. Employees who violate security policies may face restrictions on their access privileges within the organization. They may limit an individual's ability to perform certain tasks, limit or remove access to sensitive information, and they may be prevented access to specific company resources they might need to perform their role effectively. Employees who engage in hacking activities or violate compliance policies may also face disciplinary action from their organization or employer. And disciplinary measures can include warnings and reprimands, which can be simple verbal or written warnings, suspensions, or even termination or dismissal from their role. And deliberate malicious activity can affect references from an employer, impacting professional reputation and potential future employment for individuals. Linking in with that last point, employers usually want references from past employers before making any hiring decisions. They may also carry out background checks on individuals. And a history of malicious activity and non-compliance can make it much more difficult to secure employment for individuals. So what are the external implications on the organization? Well, there could be loss of status, reputational damage, potentially even prosecution. Individuals or organizations involved in hacking or non-compliance may face repercussions from professional bodies or industry associations. Violating ethical standards or engaging in illegal activities can result in the loss of professional certifications, memberships, or licenses. And this can have an impact on whole organizations too, as many organizations receive recognition and certification for reaching certain security standards and maintaining compliance. And this could be taken away in the case of a cybersecurity incident. Hacking and non-compliance can have severe consequences for an organization's and an individual's reputation and credibility. Being associated with illegal activities or unethical behavior can tarnish professional image, lead to loss of trust from colleagues and clients, and also potentially affect future interactions with other organizations. And finally, individuals and organizations could be facing prosecution. Individuals and organizations found guilty of hacking may face fines, imprisonment, or other legal penalties, depending on the severity of the offense and applicable laws. Organizations and their leaders may be held accountable for any impact of cybersecurity threats if they're found to have been negligent of appropriate security measures and upkeep. Any fines can vary in amount and are intended to deter illegal activities and compensate for damages caused by the breach. And prison time is a possible consequence for those found guilty of committing cybercrimes or violating data protection laws. So, for Patreon members, it's time to take a look at task 3 on the task sheet. This one's going to take a little bit longer, as always, about 30 to 45 minutes. So pause the video here, have a go at task 3, which is all about implications, and then come back. We'll wrap things up with a bit of a summary and a short exam question. Okay, so in this video we've identified types of hackers, we've explained the types of malicious activity that an organization may encounter, and we've also analysed the implications of hacking on an organization and individuals. Let's have a look at an exam-style question. Explain the different types of hackers in the cybersecurity domain and discuss the implications of hacking and non-compliance with a code of conduct. That brings us to the end. Now, if you're only watching on YouTube, then this will be the final video for Root Core 1 Business Context. But if you're a Patreon member, there is an exclusive Patreon members project available on Patreon for you to have a go at. It's a bit of an extended project that's going to make use of all of your skills and knowledge from Root Core 1 business context. Make sure you subscribe to youtube.com/@T-Level Tactics for future videos for T-Level digital support services. And also, if you're not a member of Patreon, head over to patreon.com/T-Level Tactics for all of the member exclusive content, task sheets, and projects that are available over there as well. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.